Let's get started. So, hi everyone. I am Jonathan, one of the engineers here at SmartBear in the technical department. So, what we do here is we can set up live workflows for your specific requirements in your organization. We'll take a look soon in what exactly we cover and what space. Today, we'll focus mostly on the design part of your API. So, our solution there for collaboration and standardization. Um, And let's see a little bit more of the agenda. So first we'll talk in general about SmartBear. We'll get to see exactly which space and some of the solutions that we have in that space. And then we will talk a little bit deeper into standards of APIs and design. Then we'll see some examples and where it fits in our solution, SwaggerHub. So SwaggerHub, sorry guys, SwaggerHub is that repository for your OAS, Open API specifications. And we'll also leave some time in the end for any general questions or specific questions that come up through the webinar, but you guys can also use the chat to write any specific questions in the chat itself. Okay, so SmartBear was founded in 2009. We're all over around the globe, many different offices. The headquarters is in Boston, Massachusetts, but we have offices in Coconut Creek. We have offices in India, Australia, Russia, and more. As you can see, over 60 million users. So we have open source solutions and consumer solutions. Some of our open source solutions include SOAP UI. So SOAP UI was created over a decade ago, which was our solution for this API communication. Helping with that UI interface with the communication. Obviously, by today, it supports other protocols as well, like REST, but it's still called SOAP UI. And then we have the Cucumber solution for BDD open source. And then we have also the standard, the API standard, which is OpenAPI specification. And that's going to be our main focus for today, our solution that supports the repository for those specification standards. Here we can see some recognition, from third-party companies where we fit in the space. But let's see a deeper view here in our entire platform. So just to understand what this big picture is before we talk about those specific products, here we can see some of the industry's most common deploying solutions and source control, but all the other icons around here is where we fit. So in the first stage here, code review and collaboration, management on the top. Here's our BDD solution with Cucumber Studio. And SwaggerHub, again, in that design phase. So SwaggerHub is our solution for those specifications to help with the actual collaboration, the teamwork, the review processes, the different roles, and governance, like who can see what, different integrations for that downstream, the process of SwaggerHub. Now, when we're talking about integration, so our products integrate with to fit in your specific environment with the most common tools out there. Some of the more common ones would be your Git repository or version control. And then also would be different scheduling products for like CI/CD. We'll talk about different examples here. Like the most common one would be integrating to your version control to ensure that we have copies of our code, and anytime the version control can notice any differences in the code, we can trigger from scheduler tools commands that will allow us to enable different operations from different all our different tools here. On the UI section of testing, so as you can see, the space that we are taking here is for quality assurance. So in the design phase, if you start with that design phase to ensure properly planning for those quality products, and here we see the UI testing solutions that we have. So Test Complete is for all your applications, your desktop applications, your different UIs and browser applications to record different operations, so we can later have those tests triggered, or you can import your Selenium scripts. If you want to do some performance testing in your UI. And then we have some hardware farms here. So if you don't want to maintain in your own all the different web browsers, desktop applications, or mobile applications here, we can integrate or maintain on our own the different hardware farms here. So any type of mobiles, any type of browsers, we can just plug in and use our testing through our own farms that we maintain. Here on the back-end testing side of things, our solution, our professional solution or enterprise solution is Ready API. So for that open source SOAP UI, everything here comes under the umbrella of Ready API. So where you can start enabling end-to-end API testing, create all your functional tests, all your workflows, all your logic, anything that makes sense for one use case that you want to continuously test against. We can later plug it into our automation environment, headless testers that just consume projects from different command lines, like we mentioned before, when we integrate to our version control and our scheduling tools. So all our products here will enable using command lines for all the operations, including SwaggerHub, which we'll see some examples today. Then we could reuse the same logic and add multiple users for one use case when we want to do our load testing and performance testing. And we get options to monitor our resources and distribute the load generators and generate statistics. And also we have a virtualization solution. This can help in the testing and testing stage right here when we have different dependencies, for example. So if we have different APIs that are stateful APIs or interconnected APIs, and we have a dependency and we still want to do our own negative testing for our own APIs, how they're affected. So we can create those virtualization services. But it could also help us with the design phase when we're starting to develop those requirements or what our APIs will look. We can also virtualize that to help parallel development. So for example, if we have a OpenAPI specification, I can plug it in, grab a virtualized service, send it to the API developers, the front-end developers, the QA team, where in the meantime, at the same time as the actual API is being developed, they can use the virtualization to give them a good example of what the API will actually be. So to start all these teams working together at the same time. Lastly, here we have alert sites. So once everything is already developed, again, to ensure quality assurance, we can have all different synthetic monitors checking our APIs consistently from multiple different regions and letting us know if anything is down or up any given time. Okay, so this is a big high level of what we cover. So if there's any interest, in live workflows from our technical team for your specific environment and where we can fit and help solution, just contact our team and we'll set that up for you guys. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're going to discuss in a high level different approaches in terms of the design for those APIs. We're going to focus today on OpenAPI specification standard because our solution SwaggerHub and also the OpenAPI specification is under our umbrella. So the open source of that project and our enterprise solution helping collaborating around and having that single source of truth will be the main focus of today. So we'll talk a little bit about a design first approach, where the benefits over there. If you're in a code first approach, you know, maybe some of the risks of going through that, and where SwaggerHub can help with these approaches. Okay, so let's get started right into it. So design first is when people get together and they talk about the API design before anyone starts writing code. So what does that mean? That means we can start bringing in different teams. You know, not only the developers are in this discussion. We can really set aside a set of requirements that's written in a standard that a bunch of different teams can understand. So once we have the standard, like we said, we're going to get parallel development. The QA team, the front-end team could use that and understand exactly what the API will look when it's ready, but also help the developers ahead of time starting to create code, knowing the end result, because the whole discussion of maybe this should fit here and this should fit there was ahead of time and not after the fact. So it looks like we have an opportunity here. We designed the whole opportunity. Maybe there's some back and forth at this stage here, and then we actually go and develop the API. In a code-first approach, the developers will first build that API, then generate a specification. So either from, you know, annotation in that API, or however the team wants to create that OpenAPI specification document, but that will happen after already the API is created and we have the code. So what that looks like, there's an opportunity or requirements. Then they develop the API. The developer team of the API will create the actual code. Then after the fact, we will create a specification. So it is easier to create a specification after the fact. We don't have to write it from scratch. But in the design first approach, we can see the benefit of no needing to change a lot of the code after the fact. So here we can see the main difference is in the code first approach, we're missing out that valuable upfront discussion with the key stakeholders. Okay, so here's some of the risks, what we face when we go with the code first approach. So it's costly building the wrong thing. Obviously, if we invested a lot of time and developed all different operations, and in the end we didn't need to use them or we needed to change them. So that's a lot of valuable time. It's harder to build consistent APIs across many teams. And we're going to see some SwaggerHub features that help with this. So what do I mean by consistent APIs across? If each team, you know, just builds their API first, we lose out on the shared templates that we can share across. We can have some guidelines in our linter that make sure that all the APIs that are created are consistent with the same set of guidelines, and we can share code. It's easier to treat the API as less than a product. So what does that mean? Design first drives involvement from product management and other key stakeholders. If we go with the code first approach, they'll usually join after the fact already that the API was created. Okay, so how does SwaggerHub help in these specific topics? We have a built-in editor with different collaboration tool. where we can have discussions, in line and in the design phase of that API specification. Once created the API, so we'll automatically create for us a mock service. And like we mentioned earlier, getting a mock service can help that parallel development and save a lot of time. But also the API developers can use that mock service just to get a quick, photo that they kind of trace. So really helping with the development, but we can also generate different SDKs and server-side stubs. So that really gives us the envelope and a lot of the code that we just need to go inside and make sure that the logic fits our own requirements. And also SwaggerHub has its own linter that we can enable. We'll see some examples where we can build in our own organization guidelines. So things beyond standard syntactical errors. Okay, so this is quickly showing a example of a workflow with a design-first approach. And this is kind of going to be the live workflow example that we're going to use. So let's kind of see what's happening here. So we have our first version, the official document or the official API currently. And if we're going through a design-first approach, we have some recommendations of different operations we want to add to that new target of the 2.0 version. So we'll create 1.1, maybe different JIRA tickets here for different collaborators and designers creating this API. And now we can get feedback on those operations before they are actually created because they're already designed in the OpenAPI specification. So we can go back and forth until it's approved and until we're sure. Once the API version is ready, so over here we'll push this into the 2.0, and that 2.0 will be the official document. And we'll talk about what we help ensure that the correct teams have access to the final document and they know always they're up to date with the official documents. But once we generated that 2.0, and maybe part of the teams are in this review stage, but some of the teams like the front end, the QA team, they just want to get that official document, the 2.0. So now we could send it out to the document because that was approved. So we know this is exactly what the actual API will be looking like to the backend, the front end, and the backend, the actual APIs can start developing. But since we have already a specification, they can generate server-side stubs, client SDK. Here we can see we could send that OAS to some testing tools that consume an OAS, since OpenAPI specification is one of the more common ones or the most common one for REST. So a lot of the tools accept it, and our own tool that we talked about, Ready API, obviously can consume that OAS, start building unit test contract validations out of the box, and virtual services, more dynamic virtual services as well. Okay, let's see here some example of what a code-first approach looks like real quick. So here, we have an existing service. We use the Swagger annotation. There's also a Swagger inspector tool that can use different collections of, different calls. So I can have all my methods there, get, post, and generate a specification. Ready API as well can use a collection of endpoints and create a specification. And then, and by the way, Swagger Inspector is a free tool. So we could use one of these methods or just write the specification after the fact, after we have all the operations. And then also I can use some of the plugins here, or the Registry API, which we'll see real quick, and bring them all into our SwaggerHub as well. So SwaggerHub can also help with the code-first approach. And as we know, most cases is some kind of combination between the two. So we have maybe existing APIs already. We want to bring in all the OAS to our main repository. Getting that centralization concept, that single source of truth. You know, we don't want to recreate APIs that are already maybe created in the organization. We want to separate internal APIs, external APIs. So really getting that repository set up. Okay, so let's actually see a live workflow of that example that we showed in the tool, so we could kind of see everything around all these features that we're trying to bring here to help with this approach. And again, I'm going to encourage anybody, if there's any questions while we're going through this, or if there was any questions on the introduction, just paste it in the chat. We'll try to pause here and there to look at that. And also we'll leave some time in the end for general questions. I see there's a question about the slides. To be honest, I had some help here with colleagues helping me creating the slides, so I can't totally explain how to create these slides, but thank you for that. Okay, so before we get right into the linter and into the main focus in SwaggerHub, this is a OpenAPI specification UI. I like to start with this page because it's like the end result that we're going to generate, you know, and this is going to be that interactive OAS that our different teams are going to take advantage of. But also, this is not only an example, this is actually the Swagger Registry API. So a lot of all the features that we're going to talk about today, if we want later down the line to plug it into that CI/CD process, either connected to our code control, version control, you know, different Git repositories, and then kicking off different operations, we can definitely use this registry API. So keep this in mind that this is out there, and there's also a CLI tool helping that, and some of those plugins that help bulk importing all your OAS into the repository. But without further ado, let's just get right into the tool here. I'll go into the linter first, and we'll come back to that homepage in a minute. Okay, so let's actually start here with a clean slot. So we're going to start with the 1 version like we saw in the example. So again, let's imagine, whoops, I have here some tools enabled. Let me just click, turn these off. We'll get into this in just a minute. Okay, so I think I turned that off. Okay, so this is our first version like we saw on that slide, and we're going to we're going to see a workflow that we're going to add the new operations. Me and my colleagues, we're all working on this design, going through that review process with management, and eventually we're going to move my changes, my colleagues' changes into the 2.0, and that 2.0 will be the official document. We'll talk about, you know, roles, who can see what, who has access, and that actual document will generate. Just a few things here to notice. We can see that this is a read only, so we'll discuss about how to set that up and what it helps us do. But if this is a read only, even though I have access to this API, I can't make any changes. And we'll also talk about the default version here. So the 101 now has this tag of default, meaning it'll always default to this in the URL. Eventually, we will change that to the 2.0. That's our goal. Okay, so let's continue in this workflow. So I'll create my own sandbox here and add my changes. So let's imagine I have a Jira ticket saying your feature to add here is a delete. I'll just copy that delete method. I won't write it all out. But the first thing that I'll do is create my own version here. So as you can see, we can have multiple versions on one API. I can call this by the name of the designer, or in this example, I'll just call it by the operation, just to see an example here. And now we can see there's no read only. I can make changes here. So I'll go underneath the post and just paste this method. And just so you know, the one version that I copied here was just created from a template. It's a simple API, which is 2 operations. So we can really focus about everything around the actual writing, the specification. But when I'm writing this specification and the different methods, I start writing them out. I'll have code completion with different objects and while I'm writing that. So let me just paste it here. Okay. So here's the delete method that I just pasted. And now we see we're getting error messages from the linter. It's talking about standard OAS, standard syntactical errors. And in a minute, we'll also add our own linter organization guidelines to help us as well with that design flow. So I'll just fix this indentation here real quick, and we can see the navigation in the left side being updated. So once these get really long, I can just pick and choose the method I want to work on. We can also see on the right side that actual UI, the end result product being updated to kind of really see in live when I'm writing the code what it will look like. So I'll just make any change here, and we will see it enabled here. But also I can focus specifically on description. So we have here a visual editor. So anything beyond the methods, the YAML itself, maybe we have UX designers that want to come in and add some documentation around the methods. Sometimes the methods alone with the try it out will be sufficient and self-explanatory how to use this API. And this is the main focus of generating this specification, but I could also add some descriptions around this, what I call prettifying the API. So this supports like markdown formats, HTML. I have an example just showing that specifically. So I copied everything but the methods. Let's take a look at what it generated just to get an idea real quick. So here we can see links, images, different format ideas, and HTML that I can add. Okay, let's continue here. And again, I'm going to encourage guys, if there's any questions or anything doesn't make sense, just write them in the chat. So our next topic will be collaboration. So let's say I'm happy with all the changes that I've made here, and I think it's ready from peer review or my manager just to see that this is approved, so I can add my methods here into that 2.0 and send it out the new version. So we'll see what it would look like to see the differences between versions in the tool itself. We'll also have the option to sync it up with our Git repositories if we prefer, code review there or seeing the differences there as well. We'll have a bidirectional sync as well. There's also a plugin for VS Code for developers that prefer using their own linter or just making changes there, and it will automatically sync here. Okay, so I'm going to invite a user, and let's here see some different roles that I can enable. So by default, when I create my own sandbox, no one can view that, and we can see some of the tags here. We talked about, that read only for the official tag to make sure that this is the most up-to-date official tag. So we can use a publish tag, which will make it read only. We could use that default tag, which will always ensure the URL goes to that latest version. We'll see some examples in a minute, but when I create my own here, there's also a tag called public and private. So as long as it's private, I can completely control who can see, who can view, who can make changes, and who can comment, and we'll see some examples here. So I can invite a specific user, and he'll have access to the API, and I can enable specific permissions. Let's say I just want them to comment now at this stage, but I could also invite, once the API is official, and I want to give access to more than 1 or 2 or 3 individuals, I can select different teams and give them permissions in bulk. So here I'll pause and go to the home page and kind of see where we can do those settings in admin role, or take a look at a higher level here. So first thing that we see in our home page is the catalog. So this is your discovery here, where you can see all the APIs that you have access to or you're working on. I can say just filter the ones with the errors because I need to fix these. I could filter different specifications, and this supports also Elasticsearch. So this really helps for the discovery as fast as possible, finding exactly the API that you're looking for. And it will also search the actual YAML itself. Also, with helping with discovery, we can create multiple different project folders here. So for example, if I'm the admin, I have access to all of these. I have access to templates, I have access to internal, external APIs, shared code. But maybe we have teams like the QA team and the front-end team. Well, they'll just have access to published APIs. So they ensure, just to see that 1.0 version when it's ready, and then the 2.0 will be available there when approved, to ensure, they're always up to date, but they only want to see the official API documents, maybe only the external APIs and so forth. So we can completely customize which team and which users will see what folders. And obviously the APIs in these folders. Okay, so let's go to the settings of the organization. This is the highest level settings. This is where we can take a look at some different members, roles, and those setting up those teams. So there's 2 categories for the different users in SwaggerHub. There's a consumer category and a designer category. A consumer category means they are going to want to see the end result. They're not part of any collaboration of the development of the API specification design. So they'll have the right to view all the APIs will be as a read-only, not only the ones with the publish tag. A designer is actually a collaborator. On my own specific APIs, I'll probably need to enable him to have access to it or edit as well, which we'll see in a minute, but they will be able to, if granted that permission, or they'll have access to create their own. And an owner just means admin privileges, so making all these changes that we're talking about. There's a few caveats here. We can also, if we decide, the QA should give us some feedback as well, we can say, okay, they can comment. We can decide this later. And in teams, I can create teams to help me invite in bulk based on a permission. So here are some examples. We can see there's no members in these, but good example of the teams that I would want to create. So maybe management here will have access to all my APIs, also the versions, the different versions, and they'll have commenting capabilities. My colleagues, the actual designers, will have ability to edit as well. The QA team, just view, just as an example here. So let's actually go back and invite one of these users. Let's see if there's any questions. Okay, why is it a read only? So that's exactly what we're covering here, and we'll see once I'm ready with the official document 2.0. I will want, once I send that over and that's the official document, I will add the publish tag. The publish tag will help ensure that that is the official document, but it'll also make it a read-only, so nobody can change ever a published API with that tag, even if they are a collaborator and they have the permission to change. So hopefully that answers. If it doesn't answer, follow up with another question. The standardization feature we'll get into in just a minute here. Okay, so let's invite a user. Again, I could just start typing up any name here. It'll pop up for a specific user, but I could also invite that bulk team, and it will be the same in terms of the permission. So let's just quickly see an example here. Let's say the dev team here, I'll give them access to edit as well. The QA team, just to view. And what did we say? We have the architects. We'll give them access to comment as well. So this is an example of how I could just invite, and each team could have hundreds of users. So just with one click, I brought them all in. That really helps later with those published APIs. But let's continue with our example. So let's say I invited my manager to take a look at the API. He'll have access, like we said. He'll see a read only here if he has access just to comment. So let's put some comments examples, marks on this API. So I'll say title missing here. And we'll put one more to add to some context to that standardization that we want to cover next. So I'll just say, let's say our own organization guideline here is to use specific format here, and we'll use semantic versioning for that example. So I'll just write here. Semantic versioning here. And I will see inline these comments. We could start having a back and forth conversation. I can resolve, but again, I'm going to pause here to see some of these guidelines that we can embed into the linter itself to give me that feedback automatically, and we can, management can focus on specifically what's unique to what I added here. So let's go, let me just save the changes here. I'll go to the, again, where I am at my home page, the setting of the organization. So that's the highest level. And I'll enable standardization. Okay, so here we can see a list of some of our, what we gather from different users. Some of the more common ones, API title must be present. So we can definitely take a look, and if something applies to our own organization, pick this. Maybe we want every operation obviously should have a 200 response. But here I can actually create my own, which fits exactly my organization. So for that example, we're going to use the semantic versioning kind of to see how it's created. So let's take a look. Okay, so for creating our custom rules, we have two logic options here. The first one will be like path existence. This is using JSON path. So I can say like every path should have a 200 response, like that 200 operation. Or I could enable a regular expression as well for a specific component. So for this example, I'm using that licensing format to make sure that it goes with major, minor semantic versioning. We can select here the rule severity. So later on, if we're talking about that CI/CD workflow, I can import different APIs. I can check that they validate or bring them out from multiple locations and validate them with our different organization rules as well from here. And I can say, if it has a error, don't send it to those official folders, or when we're talking about the official 2.0. And if we select it to be a warning, so it'll pass those, won't send like an error back. So we can, if it's like just a guideline, use a camel case or something like that, we can definitely select it to be a warning. We also have here a try it out, which really helps making sure when we're setting those up in organization level, remember all the APIs underneath that organization will see the same guidelines when they're designing. So if we want to make sure that it's on the correct paths, let's just import any API here to kind of see how that works. So I'll use the JSON path here and bring in the entire API. Let's just leave the $. So here I have the entire API. So let's say I want to focus on the version here. So I'll bring in .info component. And now, we can see that obviously it's not passing yet. But if I look, I just want to look at the version. And now it's saying that it's passing because it's semantic versioning, but also I'm making sure that I'm actually focusing on the exact correct component. And this is not the component in our example, so I'll just cancel here and save. But if we go back, I'll just make any change here. We can imagine this was set up ahead of time for all the designers moving forward. We can see these errors pop up right where we had these comments. The first one says that there's no title, and the second one says that it's not fitting the semantic versioning. Let's just fix these here. Title, whatever, any title here. And I'll just put here 1. Okay, let's see if there's any questions so far. But you can see when I made these changes, the errors disappeared. The comments obviously did not, but I can resolve them here. And what I'm getting is this way, we're building our corporate guidelines and standards into the design workflow. Okay, so I see there's a question here about merge to that 2.0, and that's exactly what we're going to see in a minute. Yep, exactly. 2 devs work in parallel, right? So we'll see that right next. Once this is approved, we will actually move everything into that 2.0 and start adding these tags, publishing it, making sure that it's accessible to all the correct stakeholders and different teams. And we're going to generate server-side stubs to the correct branches and sync them up. So let me just say resolved here. So once I resolve the comments here, we can see they disappear, but we still get that roadmap, open comments, resolved comments. This is good for later, new onboarding, or we just want to have a history of the process of how those APIs were developed. Okay, so let's say we're happy with all the changes. Now we're going to merge my differences, just like Todd helped us and asked. We're going to use the changes for me. Maybe my colleague did some options or some different operations. We're going to move everything to that 2.0. We're going to either use SwaggerHub to do that or sync through our favorite version control tool as well. So let's first see how it looks like in SwaggerHub. So if I select that 2.0, it'll show me my new operations that are here, and I could just pull them over. Not going to do that here. Are you sure? Yep, I'm sure. So we can see that similar to like your Git tools here. I can just see the differences, pull in the methods that I did. My colleague can do the same, but eventually we'll have that 2.0 because we know that's our main goal, and that will have all the changes once we went through this whole approval process, and then we'll add the different tags. So what I mean by tags, so once I'm ready and I want to generate the documentation first, then maybe I want to generate some client SDK server-side stubs, and these we can connect to specific branches to automate that once ready. So when I'm ready with the 2.0 with all the different changes, the first thing that I'll do is change some of the tags if I want to, and I'll show those options, and then I'll sync it up or do some of those operations manually or sync them up. So first, let's generate the UI. So a couple of things to notice here. So first thing, we get that automatically for us connected. If we want to, we can disable that and add them later as well. So just to note here that this is a real command line and a real endpoint. So we could use, let's just quickly see an example. If I use a command line here and send that, should see the response. And if I use a browser here, I'll get a response as well. So we can have multiple operations here. The front end can start using these, in their code to get a good example. Once the actual API is ready, they'll just change the endpoint, but the whole setup will be there as QA engineers can create unit tests as well. Once ready, though, I can change the endpoint to the real API, and this will actually be used as a real client and will give me real responses. Okay, I see here some questions on the integrations and sync. So that will be when we talk about syncing to our version control. We'll also talk about the other options there. Okay, so let's see what else I get here with that 2.0 official document. So notice here the version number. If I just select to share this URL here without the version number, it will automatically go with the latest and most official document, and currently it's 1. If I change that to 2 here, and this is the default tag that I said that we want to utilize for, where to go, for those official documents. So again, if I use this URL without the version, it should go to 2.0 as you see. The second one would be that publish tag. And if I use that publish tag now for that 2.0, I'm not going to do it currently. Let's just put it back to the 1, but that will create it and ensure that it's a read-only and nobody can ever change that. Okay, and again, all these features are to help us ensure, that we have that single source of truth, that we know the current updated version. I could also use notifications here to just get updates on a specific version as well. In our catalog, we can do that too. For any APIs, I can start saying, okay, I'm part of the published folder. I know only APIs that are in production here, and I want notifications for these. And all these APIs should have, like that default tag or the publish tag to ensure that. But these are just options based on your own recommendations, your own guidelines, your own organization. We have all these options here to help with that process of ensuring that centralization concept. Okay, so let's actually see now some of the downstream process, or if I want that bi-directional sync to my version control, or integrate or generate some of these code automatically to my branches. See if there's quickly any questions here. Okay. So integrations. By default, it was created for me, this automock. If I select to not create it by default, I can add it here as well. But 3 other categories here for the integrations. The first one would be those version control. So any Git, Bitbucket, GitHub, just syncing with the specification we just created. Then we can also sync to the gateways, updating the proxies. I see there's a question on AWS API management. So here we can see the AWS options here, Lambda and the gateways. Any version control that supports Git, we could sync up. So it really depends on what we want to generate there, if it's like a server-side stub or just the OpenAPI specification in JSON or YAML, where we can sync to our branch with version control. And then we also have a webhook. So any application that can consume an API through a URL, maybe you have a testing application that can consume an API, OAS, or a virtualization tool that can consume an OpenAPI specification, like our tools that we have. They'll consume those specifications and generate test suites or mock services, or any application that supports OAS. Let's see some examples of some that are already created. I have here an example here. So again, this is created from one of our templates that has a little bit more operations. And I created a branch. I think I took one of each just to really see a good example, but we can have as many as I want here, as you can see. So maybe I want, multiple different branches getting the specification. If I wanted to be a JSON in some, or let's actually see an example here. So I'll create by the name. Usually I'll use the name of what I'm actually generating to that specific branch here. Here we can see the connection. In my case here, it's GitHub. Once I'm connected, it'll show me those repositories. So I'm connected to the Swagger repository, and here we have an advanced and basic sync. So the basic sync will just rewrite that master branch if that's what you want to do. In my case, I'm creating a separate branch for each. So I'm calling it JSON resolved. And here I pick what I want to generate to that. So based on the stack that we're using, in this case, it's not the code, it's just the JSON OAS. But we can see here, client SDK, very similar, just selected TypeScript for that case. Here we can see this is going to update my gateway as well. I have a mock service here, and I can enable bidirectional sync. So if we're collaborating on the actual specification, it's not a gateway that just consumes an end result and updates the proxy. We can pull and push, but I can also select, which ones I want to enable to be synced up. I can turn off some of these. Maybe I want the gateway to control manually when I'm ready. So I can turn these off or fire them whenever I'm ready. Okay, we're coming close to the end of the hour. Let's see if there's any questions. Okay, so there's a question here from Nicholas. When we have the specification and the dev team did not create the API yet, they're getting ready now with the new specification to create it. Can the front end devs use that mock service to help for example, a post request? So that's a very good question and a very good example of exactly when you would want to use like the mock. And here we'll go back. So this one has no API. We created it here live. And by default, this try it out method will give us that mock, which will actually work. So if I use this, did I use the post or the get? Okay, so this is the post. If I use this in my own browser, it should give me a result here from that example. So the answer to that is yes. If there's no other questions right here, let me just add another feature that's really helpful that we have here for enabling standardization. So we saw that linter in the back end that we can enable, but we could also use shared code. So for example, let's say in this 404 response here, let's see which one. Yep, it's in the get. So here in the get example, we're using a component here. This is just standard OpenAPI specification components that lets us here use locally, so we can reference the same model. But let's say we want to maintain this externally, not only to help where you don't have to reuse the same code and rewrite everything, but we also want to ensure standard across. So we want to maintain same messaging with that 404 response. So for a collection of different components that we can reference externally, we call that a domain. A domain looks like an API definition, but it's just a collection of a bunch of different code references. So let me show you an example. If I go to my domains here, just use one collection real quick. So here, all these components I can reference externally and maintain them here separately, and obviously enable access similar to those APIs to the correct team, keep this private, can go with a specific version and so forth. So if I utilize code completion here, we can see an example. Let me just choose the correct one here. Where's that 404 response? Okay, so I'm going to delete the internal component reference. I'll utilize code completion, control spacebar. This will give me the list of all the APIs, all the domains or components that I have access to. So here we can see those two local ones that are here, but all the other ones are components that I have access to and have the default tag. So this way we can ensure users seeing the correct list. So if I pick here this 404 response right here, we should see the different response message, the one that we want to make sure that everyone is using this. And we could also enforce this if I add a custom rule. Okay, I'm just taking a look at a quick question here before we get to the top of the hour. But please, guys, any questions here, write them out. And if there wasn't time to cover something that you wanted to, or you want to set up a more customized workflow, either on SwaggerHub or any of the products we talked about, please reach out to us so we can set that up for you. Okay, so let's see. How's the design implementation consistency maintained? Example is the design on SwaggerHub being developed before getting into the testing phase. Also, when a design is updated, how is the incorporated into the engineering cycle? That's a pretty detailed question. Let me try to understand it better. Okay, so that's a little bit of a more personal question, personal scenario, because SwaggerHub is meant to fit multiple scenarios. So how does it how is it incorporated is kind of up to you. I kind of showcased different tools that we have here to help with that. So for example, it depends on the admin privileges and the setup. If you guys are like a smaller team and you want it to be more freestyle, I'll give access to everybody, but we'll make sure that the correct tags are applied, and I'll have like an official published folder like we saw here. If we're larger and we want more strict rules, so some teams will have only access to like that official folder, and then that's how they'll know. But if it didn't really answer your typical use case or your specific requirements, and you're interested, we can set up something that's more fitting and presenting your use cases. So we can plan ahead of time and we can have that conversation. So please reach out to us on any specific use case so we can set that up. Okay, guys, this is the end of the hour. So hope you guys really enjoyed. And hopefully this was helpful. We'll see you guys next time.